Hello and welcome to the Kidney Ally Nutrition Podcast, the one and only podcast where we tackle the hardest questions around what constitutes a good, healthy kidney diet. Whether you're a patient, a carer, a nephrologist, or a dietitian, I'm sure you'll learn something new today about what constitutes a good, healthy kidney diet. Hi guys, welcome to the Kidney Nutrition Podcast with Kidney Ally. I'm Carl, your co-host, co-founder of Kidney Ally and a kidney transplant patient, and this is my co-host.
I'm Ruth Kander, I'm a renal dietitian in London, and we're here to talk to you today.
Yes, about plant-based diets, which is all the fad that I think I've seen in the past 2 years online with kidney patients, and understanding what the positives of that mean, and kind of really uncovering the myths behind it as well, because I think that it is a bit confusing. It's not a solution. It is a way of, changing your diet. And there's lots of things about it that I think patients are really confused about and what that really means. So probably first question to our wonderful master, Ruth, why has plant-based diet become such a big thing for kidney patients? Like, what's it really all about?
I think that plant-based become quite big because there's a lot of people saying how you should reduce the amount of protein that you're eating, in particular animal protein. Now, it stems way back, like in the 30s, there was a professor who said, no protein actually in CKD, and he did that with all his patients, and then they all got sick and they had no protein. So, and I think that as the years have gone on, various people, experts have said, plant proteins are better than animal proteins, and then I think this is how it's evolved. And it's and also generally, I think in a global sense that the whole world is going more towards plant-based diets because it's helpful for diabetes, stroke, heart disease. So it's a global thing. And then people have jumped on the bandwagon that if you've got kidney disease, you should avoid all animal protein and just have a plant-based diet.
I think also there's elements of kind of, as a population, whichever country you're from, meat has kind of been very central to a lot of diets. I know growing up, my mum used to try and make me vegetables. I didn't want to eat vegetables. I just want to eat chicken or beef or something that was meat-based. And that just became part of pop culture, and then everyone just got used to it. And that's, whereas if you look back at the history of humans, like we're tens of thousands of years old as a species, and for most of that time, a vast majority of that time, we were really foraging through forests and just living off the land. A majority of time it was plants. So our bodies really are used to eating plants, whereas we weren't, 20,000 years ago going to Tesco or Walmart and buying some chicken and frying it up. That was probably once a month, once a week maximum meal. Whereas if we keep putting that stuff in our body, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, our bodies can't actually digest it properly. And that's where my head makes a lot of sense to fill your diet full of veggies and plants, because that's what our bodies actually respond to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think also meat is very heavy and it's very high in fat as well. And I think that is no good too. So yeah.
And medical evidence behind this. So it seems like a lot of doctors have got behind it from what I'm seeing online. I could be wrong, but is there like medical evidence that proves that if you had an average diet, which for most people is usually not that healthy, to get healthier, they go, okay, I'm going to eat plant-based. Is there medical evidence if I switch from an average diet to plant-based that my kidney function will be better?
So in terms of actual kidney function, there is no hardcore literature on that, which is really disappointing, actually. But there is a lot of literature on reduction of risk of diabetes or putting diabetes into remission, reduction of heart disease, reduction of stroke, reduction of blood pressure when people switch to a plant-based diet. I think that with the kidney population, it's not an easy study to do. It will cost millions, and I don't think they're going to do it. But I have to say that with this group that we've created, and also just being more involved at this level of kidney disease, I'm finding that so many people are reporting improvement in their kidney function when they've reduced the amount of animal protein and gone plant-based. Huge improvements. And it's like a lot of people are saying this. It's not just one or two, it's many people. So I am much more convinced by this than I used to be. But in terms of hardcore papers, there's none.
There's none. So it kind of like, it feels that it would, if you weren't thinking about it, it would probably be at least to kind of balance your diet out. So there's more plants than less would probably be the strong recommendation. But to go full plant-based is probably, for someone that eats a lot of meat, quite hard to do. So even if you shift your diet slightly, it's probably going to be see an improvement. There is also the ethics behind it as well, and that's really got why I am a pescatarian. So I eat fish. So that was driven by watching that Cowspiracy documentary. Actually, I watched that and realized, oh, hang on a second. As a species, like we keep making animals to eat them, which makes no sense when we could be just eating plants and fish. And the effect on the planet was quite bad. Slight brainwashing from the documentary, but I felt really bad about eating meat from that point on. And I think that the thing I could do was maybe just eat less meat and eat a plant-based diet. But then I've seen my kidney function since doing that for the past 3 or 4 years being really stable as a transplant patient. So I could only report for myself by taking meat out of my diet, and being a transplant patient for doing that for 4 years now, no issues with my kidneys. It's very stable, all quite positive. So audience of one, not audience of many, but I can attest to the fact that removing animal proteins but being quite positive for me. And the one thing I was initially worried about when I did go pescatarian based, and the reason why I probably went pescatarian based instead of vegetarian, is because I was worried about where to get the protein from. And I knew that I like fish, at least I'll get it from fish. But for someone that is plant-based, I think that's probably the biggest question people ask. They're like, okay, I used to eat a steak every day, put chicken in my meal, put pork in my meal. Where do patients, if they think about switching to this diet, which looks really positive, but then where do they get their protein? Because you need to have protein, right? Even if it's plant-based protein.
100%, yeah. And you also need decent, protein. I was talking to somebody last week who's changed his diet massively, and it was really healthy, but it was, fruits and vegetables and a bit of grains, but there was no protein hardly in it at all. So that was a bit disappointing. So the main sources of plant protein are going to be from beans and lentils and tofu and soya. There's something called seitan, which is the protein part from wheat, and it's made. You buy it as a powder and you mix it with water and you make it into a log. Actually, it looks like a log, and then you cook it and slice it, and that's also really nice. And there's also a little bit of protein in nuts. And then also there's a grain called quinoa, which is higher protein than other grains, so higher protein than protein in rice, for example. So those would be the main sources, but you would really need to make a very big effort to eat them every day and eat good sized portions, because if you don't, then you're not going to get anywhere near enough protein.
With beans, I kind of did pick that up when I started tracking the amount of grams of protein that I needed a day. Realized when I went to a pescatarian diet, which has a lot of protein from fish, the days I wasn't eating fish, I was almost next to nothing protein, because even if you have a bit of quinoa or a bit of beans or a bit of tofu, it still only doesn't get to your 50-60 grams you need a day. So you do need to be thinking about, if on a plant-based diet, how can I add protein to this? Because the protein, whether it's from something, needs to be in there, because otherwise, a big misconcern, which you can check out a previous podcast on protein, is you can't remove the protein from the diet, because your body needs protein. Otherwise, other bad things will happen, and your kidney can still work at its fine. Even if it's a plant-based protein, you need to keep adding it to your diet as well, because other bad things will happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just remember to take all those foods, and it's having a variety of foods. So and also plant-based doesn't mean, I was just looking up this morning what it means. It doesn't mean to cut out all meat and fish and chicken. It's just reducing it. So actually, there was a very nice guide on the British Nutrition Foundation website, and it had a 7-day meal plan, and it had one day was plant-based, and one day was a bit of animal protein, so chicken and fish, and one day was plant-based. So I kind of thought that was a really nice way of doing it, and I do talk about that with people. So I often say to people, well, maybe have one meal plant-based and one meal with chicken or egg or fish or something like that. So then you're getting a real mixture of proteins in a day, and then you'll get all the right balance of protein, all the amino acids that you need for good health.
And that's something we're going to really push on the Kidney Ally website, where we're going to add a lot of recipes that are as delicious as they would if you were eating from a regular person's diet, particularly around plant-based, and particularly around finding ways to find flavors through not necessarily a meat means, but through whether it's areas like beans or through particular vegetables. You can get those flavors from that. You don't need to add a bunch of salt and have meat in that particular dish to have a delicious dish, which is really important as well. I think it's an important note. So in regards to the hardcore area of a plant-based diet of actual plants, does it mean if you're on a plant-based diet, I can then just go, okay, let's just find all the vegetables I like and focus on them? Is there for kidney patients a bit of a worry about certain vegetables and others, or how should they approach that?
The only time you need to worry about vegetables is if you've got a high potassium level. And we've talked about potassium, done a potassium podcast, but so you can have any vegetable is absolutely fine for kidney patients. But remember, if you're borderline potassium, if you're high potassium, remember the high potassium ones, and maybe boil vegetables more often, because boiling removes potassium, and do it that way. I just want to mention, in terms of fruit, the only fruit that should be avoided with kidney patients is star fruit, because that's toxic to kidney patients. But otherwise, all fruits and vegetables are absolutely fine.
Yeah, I think that's another big point. If you are listening to this, take that in, that there are no foods that are bad for your kidneys at all. It's unless your potassium is high, then you need to worry about what you're putting in your mouth, because it might be high potassium that your kidneys can't filter out. That's the only thing you need to worry about. Other than that, go nuts with fruit and veggies besides star fruit, and just try and experiment with different ones to find different flavors. Google them, find veggies you like, and hopefully maybe check out the Kidney Ally website for more recipes as well. And then another big area of plant-based is around this whole emerging market of plant-based alternatives, because obviously people, for either ethical reasons or dietary reasons, go plant-based, but then they go, oh, I still need to have milk, or I still like the texture of meat, or I still want to eat processed ham or fish. So that's only going to grow as a market over the next 10-20 years. Is there particular things that kidney patients should look out for when they're looking to buy rice milk or oat milk, or for example seitan chicken, or plant-based ham or fish? Is there things that they should be looking for when they're on a plant-based diet with these?
So in terms of the milks, I think just make sure that they're fortified with calcium, because otherwise you're going to miss out on the calcium. So rice milk, oat milk, almond milk, just make sure it's fortified. So it's usually fortified at a level of 120 milligrams of calcium per 100 mils of product, or 100 grams. That's the milk. And then in terms of the whole kind of massive market, I mean, it's become massive, this market of, ready-made plant-based meals. I think, again, it's the same as anything else. It's a lot of, it could be very processed and heavily processed and contain a lot of chemicals, which are not necessarily good for kidney patients. And there's a lot of phosphorus additives in these products. And I was reading actually somewhere it was, maybe it was yesterday, that how bad they are for anybody, even for healthy people. So just be conscious of, what you're buying, how often you're having it, because really the best things are beans and lentils and tofu and soya beans, fresh, kind of dried soya beans. but do be careful with them and do treat them like you would any other, kind of processed meat or ready meal. Because just because it's plant-based and it's not based on chicken or ham doesn't mean it's healthy. It really
Yeah,
doesn't.
I have noticed as well. I'm not sure if in the US they have this, but if you go to the plant-based section of the UK supermarkets, you'll notice that basically a lot of the corn products, which is very popular over here, if you look at the salt area, the salt is
Yeah.
mental. So like you'll look at processed ham, it's like literally like it's like a no-no. So just don't look at the amount of salt. If it's red, just avoid it. And if you're in the US and they don't have those particular areas or any other part of the world, just check the salt content per 100 grams and know that that's probably where you need to start with your kidney diet, is reducing salt. And in a lot of these plant-based processed foods, the way they can actually make it tasty for the consumer is they just a lot of salt. There's a lot of salt in there. So just be careful about that in particular for kidney patients as well. And to Ruth's point, same thing about milk with calcium. And do they have to look at maybe beyond just as a general person fat content? Do you find that sometimes with these maybe the ready meals might have a lot of high saturated fat in it because they add flavor somewhere like sugar or something else like oil to make it tastier?
I know that coconut milk is quite high in saturated fat, and we don't recommend it. And there's been an ongoing debate over the years how, maybe the saturated fat in coconut milk is healthier than regular saturated fat from, let's say, animal. But we don't really know. I haven't really done any proper studies. In terms of sort of almonds and all that, to be honest, I'm not hugely familiar with them, and I'm not sure if they have got a lot of I don't think they are high fat, and I don't think they're so high sugar, but always check the label to see with the traffic light system if it's got a lot of sugar and fat in it. But I think that they're not. I think they're actually fine. It's just I'm more worried about all this plant-based processed food, actually, because you can be on a plant-based diet and we eat really unhealthily, and
Yeah,
that is not the
100%. I kind of seen that a lot. Like in the UK, they've got a vegan sausage roll at Greg's, which for people outside the UK is like kind of like a fast food bakery. And I'm sure that it's like again, the marketing behind a lot of these things make it perceive that plant-based equals healthy. It in no case does that mean that plant-based equals healthy, because they're using that as a marketing tool to convince you to buy the product, when in fact it's full of salt or sugar or other additives that will make it taste nice but then seem healthy. It's just kind of being very careful. The safest way, as Ruth said, kind of is actual plants, fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, fresh herbs, and also fresh quinoa, fresh chickpeas, fresh beans, but then making sure that you're, with regards to having a high potassium diet, just being careful if you have high potassium, that you're not overdoing it on the potassium side, and you're boiling your veggies and you're boiling your legumes and those items to kind of reduce the potassium. But other than that, it's just basically the fresher the better, and being careful of these kind of new products. So then overall, if I was a kidney patient and I'm wanting to get into a plant-based diet, we've gone through the history, why it's good for you, kind of where I get my protein from, the places I get it from, but where would I actually start? Like, so I go, I'm convinced I need to start this plant-based diet because I feel like that's a way of life I can move forward. Where would I start with that? Like, what would my first step be?
So I would really suggest thinking about one meal a day, changing one meal a day, or even less than that, maybe 3 meals a week. And then thinking, right, I'm going to explore using beans and lentils. There's some very good websites that explain really well how to cook them and what to do with them. I think for me, the simplest thing is I used to have a vegan who used to come to me regularly, and I made up this dish really easily: fried leeks, add crushed tomatoes, and then add in a tin of mixed beans. She loved it. So it's actually very easy once you just get your head around it. That obviously everyone's got the internet. You can do a lot of research on how to cook these things. It's really easy. If you get a tin of beans, it's very easy. It may be a bit tricky with the dried because you have to soak them overnight and you might not be used to doing that. And that, you know, if you forget, then you can't use them because they can be toxic. But I think tin beans or tin lentils in a salad, or in a salad like lunchtime, boil up some edamame beans, chuck them with some leaves and cucumber and radish and carrot. It's a great lunch with a handful
Yeah,
of
a
quinoa.
good example is I think last night I got some vermicelli noodles, and then with some red peppers, some zucchini, and what was the other vegetable that I used? Oh yeah, a bit of broccoli. And then I got tofu and I drained it, and then I turned them into like chicken pieces, and then
Oh
put
yeah,
them in the oven, made them crispy, and seasoned them with a bit of dry rub and kind of some cumin and some paprika. And having that all together, I kind of made that for my family. And you know, it's something you'd get at a restaurant, something that has that quality. It has the texture of the meat with the tofu because it's crispy, and you can get all those same flavors as you would from chicken. And I think to
yeah,
Ruth's point, I think it's experimenting, trying to find your favorite dishes and how you can replicate, because long term it's going to be hugely valuable for your health. And trying just to find out. I think most important, what I find is like find the flavor profile you like and try and replace items to get that same flavor you like or texture, with something that will be plant based. And that I think tofu is a really good area for replacing chicken.
yeah,
You know, quinoa and bulgur and lentils is a really good area for texture if you want
yeah,
something that's got a bit more bite in it. And beans as well is quite nice for getting you kind of, when the first thing you miss when you remove meat is the texture and the, you know, the main bit of the dish, and trying to find that. Chickpeas is also a very good area for filling, keeping yourself fulfilled. And you can do a lot with making burgers with once you've got those items. So there's lots you can do, and there's so much on the internet you can research. So I just get experimenting with one or two dishes and find one that you can turn into a staple.
yeah,
Um,
100%.
and
I
then that,
think it is tricky. Sorry, it is tricky, but I think just try slowly. Like I said, one meal a day or a couple of meals a week, and just like Carl said, experiment. It's really worth it, and I think it will really benefit your health.
yeah, and it's not. I definitely think there is a bit of perception around plant-based and vegan that's slowly moving away. But before it was all around like a hippie focus and saving the planet and all that negative connotations about it. It is really about your body. And if we go back to the beginning of the podcast, you know, humans have been around for tens of thousands of years, and our bodies aren't used to taking on so much meat. So it's doing your body a favor by eating more veggies or veggie related items and fruit, because that's what your body can digest really well. And if your kidneys aren't working that well, it's even better for your kidneys to digest, good for your weight. And think about it from more that perspective, and not the fact that you're changing your lifestyle. It's just finding the flavors you like, changing a few meals. And in the long term, lots of research has shown that I think the only ones I've seen that relate to plant-based diet that's seen research is Mediterranean diets.
Yeah, yeah,
Mediterranean diet. That has there been medical research around Mediterranean diets, and
yeah.
it's probably the closest one that there is a bit of.
Quite a lot. There's quite a lot on the Mediterranean diet and benefits to health, in terms of diabetes and heart disease and stroke, blood pressure management. There is quite
That's
a lot.
probably the closest thing to
Yeah,
plant-based diet where there
yeah,
is medical, and it,
yeah,
it doesn't. I mean, it makes logical sense. The more fresh things you're putting in your
yeah,
body, the
yeah.
healthier you're going to be. So, the last kind of question we've have is around, um, you know, we've talked about where you start, but is there particular people online to follow, that are trusted, or areas that people should go to find information beyond this podcast and beyond our Facebook group, that you recommend?
So there's a fabulous dietitian in America, Jen Hernandez, who is she calls herself plant-based kidneys, or plant-powered kidneys, sorry, plant-powered kidneys. And she's got a Facebook group, and she's got a website with lots of great information about having a plant-based diet and how to start and what to do and the benefits as well. She's really the main person in the kidney nutrition world I would go to. There's also there's a book called Plant Fed Kidneys. If you just Google it, it will come up straight away. It's got a picture of a kidney and a plant on the front cover, and that's not a bad book to look at if you're not sure where to start.
And we'll try our best with the Kidney Ally website to put as many plant-friendly recipes as possible, with lots of flavor combinations as well. If you want to check that out, if the website's not up, that's kidneyally.com. And we discuss all this stuff in our Facebook group, Kidney Disease Diet and Recipe Tips as well, which you'll see on Facebook with a nice big salmon in the middle. Which is quite contradictory to the podcast, but on plant-based. But yeah, anyway, long story short, there's lots of information online, but be careful where you get it from. Make sure it's verified either from Ruth or from a national institution, and that is medically verified. But that's kind of the end of the podcast today, guys. Thank you so much for spending time with us. You can check out the back catalog. There's lots of different podcasts now you can check out. Again, check out the website, kidneyally.com. And join the conversation on our Facebook group. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.